bills. That means that the sponsors of the legislation will come up, whoever, oh, okay, it's a baby. I thought it was a recording. Oh, that's good. Refreshing. That means the sponsor of the legislation will come up, explain what the bill does, what the purpose of the legislation is, and we will give them as much time as they need. Then we will hear the prime opponents of the legislation and give them also as much time as they need to ensure that everyone gets a chance to speak. The remaining witnesses are going to be asked to hold their testimony to 2 minutes. So you will all get an equal amount of time to present your case. If you have written testimony, please present it to our clerk. We will copy it for the members of our committee. And I would recommend that you don't read testimony. You get 2 bites at the apple. If you hand in your testimony, it gets entered into our record. And if you speak from your heart extemporaneously, usually it comes across a lot better and makes you a more effective witness. So before we start, we're going to take our roll, and then we are going to take a vote to hold the bill for further study. Why? Because it keeps all of the legislation we're hearing tonight alive within the confines of our committee. And if you have recommendations that you're going to give us, we can amend the bills before we act upon them. So with that, I would ask the clerk to please take the roll.
Chairman McNamara.
Here.
Representative Diaz.
Here.
Representative Bazzanaro.
Here.
Representative Canario.
Here.
Representative Abney.
Here.
Representative Ackerman.
Here.
Representative Amore.
Here.
Representative Bennett.
Here.
Representative Corbasi.
Here.
Representative Fogarty. Representative Canty.
Here.
Representative Lancia.
Here.
Representative Maldonado. Here. Representative McLaughlin.
Present.
Representative Moran.
Here.
Representative Price.
Here.
Representative Friedenberg.
Here.
Chairman, we have a quorum.
Okay, we do have a quorum. At this time, I am going to make a motion to hold the following bills for further study. 7082, 7255, 7256, 7257, 7274. I will make that motion. Second by Representative Handy. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Thank you. Is Representative Hull here? No, he's not. We are going to hear, seeing that all of these bills, the following 3 bills, 7082, 7255, and 7274, address similar issues with GMO labeling. At this time, I would like Representative Filippi to come forward, and if he could just introduce his bill and describe it. Welcome, Representative Filippi from Block Island and also South Kingston.
Charlestown, South Kingstown.
Charlestown, South Kingston.
A portion of West Philly too, Mr. Chairman.
Very good. Welcome, and please proceed.
I'm happy to be back before the committee, and I had this bill last year, and I'll repeat just a little bit of my testimony. I fully support Representative Canario's bill and Hull's bill, which requires products to be labeled. The issue we have is that there's court cases going on through the United States which question the ability of individual states to mandate labeling in excess of those federal regulations. And there's also an act in front of the federal government, I believe it's passed the House but not the Senate, nicknamed the DARK Act. And that would actually legislatively preempt states from requiring labels for genetically modified foods. So if a court case decides we can't require additional labeling, or the DARK Act passes, then this bill is almost a saving grace, because what this bill requires is that grocery stores post a sign that says, unless otherwise noted, everything contains genetically modified organisms. And I think that's prudent, because the Grocers Manufacturing Association said fully 75% of all foods contain genetically modified organisms. So I think it's safe to assume that most things we eat contain GMOs. And I've also found that things that don't contain GMOs, it's already conspicuously labeled as such on the package, because you can sell it for more money. There's a higher demand for that type of product. So this is something we could institute immediately, and it would be immune from court challenge. It would be immune from any federal preemption or the Federal Dark Act, because we're not actually labeling the products that move in interstate commerce. We're requiring our grocers, to post a sign in their facility. So I think it's a good idea. Like I said, I fully support the labeling of products, but if we can't get there, this bill is the best second. I just want to speak briefly about GMOs, because I think there's a lot of misinformation out there. And I want to state first what GMOs aren't. GMOs are not hybrids. GMOs are not something that can be created in nature. Beets, carrots, corn, potatoes, a thing called a tangelo, which is a grapefruit and a tangerine mix, a pluot, which is a plum and apricot crossbreeding, and a tayberry, Mr. Chairman, which is a blackberry and a raspberry, that can naturally occur through hybrid and crossbreeding. What a GMO is where you actually splice genes or DNA from organisms which could never mate with each other or reproduce to create some new hybrid organism. Essentially playing God, if you will. And some crazy examples out there, which I found recently, is salmon. Its nickname is frankenfish. And it grows very, very quickly. And what they've done is they've spliced the DNA from an eel-like fish called the ocean puat. And what that does is it shuts down the DNA in the fish, or the gene in the fish, that stops the salmon from growing in cold water. The next one, which is actually quite scary, is a cabbage that is spliced with the DNA of a scorpion. And this is actually being made in China, and it actually causes the cabbage to produce an insecticide, which prevents insects. When they eat it, they die, and they want us to consume it. Corns are actually being spliced with a gene to create a DT toxin, which is also an insecticide. And they say it's not harmful for humans, and that may be so. I don't believe it isn't. I think if you eat toxins in large quantities, it may have some effect on you. And of course, there's the glyphosate-resistant plants. And glyphosate is the chemical in Roundup. And I'll wind it down, Chairman, real quickly. But glyphosate is what's in Roundup. And basically, they make these plants resistant to glyphosate. They spray the entire field with glyphosate. It kills everything except the Roundup-ready plants. And the glyphosate gets absorbed into the plants. And they found glyphosate in umbilical cords, in all of our bodies, and in placentas. So it's pervasive. So, sir, this is a great bill. I hope Des Canario's bill passes, but if it doesn't, I hope the committee will consider this second best bill.
Representative Hull's bill.
Or Representative Hull's bill, too, which is excellent. And I thank him for his leadership on this, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Are there any questions for Representative Filippi? Thank you very much, Representative.
It's my pleasure,
Very
sir.
informative. Very informative. Thank you. No? The other little item that we have, unlike the Jerry Springer show, we don't applaud and make noises. It disrupts the process and takes away from your time, and we don't want that. Next, Representative Ray Hull of Providence. He's the godfather of GMO labeling legislation here in the House. Has been at this for how many years, Representative?
5 anyway.
5 years. Very good. Welcome. Please proceed. Representative Raymond Hull of Providence.
I won't belabor you, committee. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, and also the people who've joined us this evening that have been joining us for the last 5 years. Representative Filippi, thank you for being so informative. If only I could get that from some of the labeling people, it would be great. With that said, all I'm asking and all we're asking is to let us know what's in our food. It's simple. It's not asking much. Please don't hide anything from us. We just want to know, is that so hard to ask? And I say it that simple because that's how simple it is. Stop trying to be this or be that or explain that it's some carcinogen that I can't even say or pronounce or even spell. It's that in a nutshell. Simple, sweet, let me know. I will make the decision whether I will purchase or not. With that, Mr. Chairman, I say thank you, and I'd love to see
Thank you. Are there any
passage.
questions for Representative Hull? Thank you very much, Representative Hull.
Thank
Next, I would ask Representative Canario and Tara Cook-Littman can also join if Tara is here. We'll be joining Representative Canario for their opening. Welcome. Both, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Thank you to Representative Hull and Representative Filippi. Obviously, we're here for one purpose, and that is, at the end of the day, we would like the consumers to know what they are consuming into their bodies. According to the World Health Organization, genetically modified foods are foods that are derived from organisms whose genetic material, DNA, has been modified in a way that does not occur naturally. Ever since GMOs entered the market some 20 years ago, the consumers have been kept in the dark about whether foods we feed our families contain GMOs. While our reasons for wanting to know what's in our food may vary, what unifies us is the belief that it is our right to know. Without labeling of GMOs, the consumer, you and I, cannot make an informed choice about what we want to put into our bodies. 64 countries, 28 nations in the European Union, Japan, Australia, Brazil, Russia, and China require labeling of genetically modified foods. Yet polls have repeatedly shown that the vast majority of Americans want the right to know. Vermont, Connecticut, and Maine have already passed labeling laws. And in the past 2 years, more than 70 labeling bills are on the ballot or initiatives were introduced across 30 states. We ask ourselves, why hasn't the FDA addressed GMO labeling? We just heard from Representative Filippi talk about the Dark Act. Monsanto is a multi-million-dollar company that makes chemicals such as Roundup. Now, they are very influential in Washington, D.C. If you want to know more about that, just a simple search on the internet will reveal some very interesting facts. Our past FDA commissioner was a former Monsanto lobbyist. You connect the dots. A senior advisor to the FDA worked at a law firm that represented Monsanto. The federal government is struggling to deal with many, many challenges. Never mind GMO labeling. The reason why they probably haven't addressed it is because of the things I have just mentioned. I'm going to end with the people of the state of Rhode Island and the people of our entire nation are counting on us, one by one, to help them help us make an informed decision whether or not we want to consume foods that have been genetically altered. Here is our chance to be on the right side of history. Let's get GMO labeling passed. Let's give the people, us, what they not only deserve, but what is our right to know. Thank you.
Do you want to introduce Tara, Dennis?
To my left here is a very
Tara.
good friend and the founder of the For Citizens for GMO Labeling, Tara Cook-Littman.
Thank you, Representative Canario, and thank you, Chairman, and the rest of the committee for this opportunity to speak with all of you tonight. While we're standing in Rhode Island tonight, this fight is taking place across the country at the state level, and our organization is dedicated to helping grassroots activists throughout this country to stand up and get their right to know what's in their food. Representative Canario did a great job describing how this movement is expanding everywhere. Over 90% of Americans in polls consistently show that Americans want GMOs labeled. 64 countries already label. Why not here in the United States? And just like Connecticut, Vermont, and Maine, the legislators of this state have a chance to be heroes to Americans, not just in Rhode Island, but throughout this country. There are a myriad of reasons that Americans might want to avoid GMOs, but in the end, none of those reasons matter. Whether it's potential health concerns or environmental concerns or religious reasons or cultural choice, we have that right to know. We need to know, and we deserve to know what's in our food. It is such a simple request. Now, because we're working throughout this country, we already know what the opposition will tell you. They are going to tell you that this should take place at the federal level. And Representative Canario mentioned the DARK Act, and I want to make it very clear that the DARK Act in Washington, D.C. is not a solution for GMO labeling. It would not give Americans the right to know what's in their food. And as its name tells, it would deny Americans the right to know and keep us in the dark about what we're eating. We would love nothing more than a federal solution, but that's just not going to happen right now. And so consumers across the country are turning to you, our state legislators, because our history shows that the states can act as laboratories of democracy and help lead the way to show the desire of the people. You're also going to hear that this is potentially unconstitutional. But I can tell you that the lower court in Vermont has already decided in our favor. We have a court that has already said state GMO labeling is perfectly constitutional. The Second Circuit is currently hearing this case, and we expect to find out their decision any day, but we don't expect it to be any different than the lower court's findings. We'll also hear that people can choose to eat organic if they want to. Why do we need GMO labels? That is a completely, it's a social justice issue because not everybody can afford to buy organic. Not everybody has access to organic or non-GMO products. And products that are labeled GMOs will give everyone throughout this country access to non-GMO products. You'll also hear that labeling is going to cost the consumers and the companies more. Well, a huge company, Campbell's, just announced that they are going to voluntarily label GMOs at no cost to consumers and no increased cost to themselves. They believe in our right to know. We also hear it will confuse consumers, but when has more information ever confused consumers? We are smart enough to make decisions for ourselves. We simply need the information. We cannot allow corporate interests to continue to squash our right to know. Please give Rhode Island residents the right to know, just like Vermont, which is implementing in July, Connecticut, and Maine. You truly will be heroes. And I'm more than happy to answer any questions, and will also direct you to not only my testimony, but testimony from different organizations that we've submitted, including Center for Food Safety, Just Label It, and some other organic companies. Thank you very much.
Representative Handy.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you very much. Again, I concur that I think there's a lot of good information already on there about, may contain nuts, may contain wheat, may contain soy, and things like that. So I don't see why they wouldn't be able to add that. But I was hoping you could just remind me too. Did Connecticut's law have a trigger in it? Did one of the other states have a trigger in it, meaning that they would go into place when X number of states around them or things like that. Can you just to refresh our memories on that?
Sure, yes. So there are 3 states that have passed laws. Vermont, incredibly, passed a law without any trigger clause, and their law is implementing in July. So that will be happening very soon. Both the Connecticut law and the Maine law had some requirements that surrounding states also pass laws. And there's also a population requirement in the Connecticut law that there's an aggregate population of 20 million people living in states that have also passed laws. We're looking at that now in Connecticut and hoping to either remove the trigger clause and join Vermont or at least lower the population amount. It should also come to your attention that Massachusetts, your neighbor, has a GMO labeling law that currently has 75% of their entire legislature signed on as co-sponsors.
Thank you very much
Thank
for your
you.
testimony. So next, I would like to ask Paul Pescatello to step up, and the Honorable Wayne Salisbury, former minority leader in the House of Representatives, retired, and Henry Wright also. Please, I was looking okay, both okay. So this will be the leading opponents of the 3 bills. Paul, is it Dr. Piscatello?
I do have a PhD, but I just go by Paul or
You were going to
Mr.
be
Pescatello.
like you were going to be a doctor, but you didn't have the patience, right? Okay, welcome, doctor. Please proceed.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me tonight. So I'm Paul Pescatello. I'm president of the New England Biotech Association. I also run the Bioscience Growth Council, and we work for health, both based in Connecticut. These organizations advocate on behalf of biomedical research and count among our members some of New England's leading biotechnology companies, biomedical research institutions. The overarching goal of all our members and all our companies are to grow the biotech sector, to create well-paying jobs, meaningful jobs, and support well-funded basic and translational university research, as well as industry research and clinical and product development that leads to medicines, new medicines on pharmacy shelves, new cures, new treatments, new options for patients, and for the subject tonight here, higher quality, better foods, better costing foods to consumers. I'm here to speak in opposition to House Bills 7082 and 7274. Each bill, as I guess you know now, would require the labeling of foods that are made with the aid of biotechnology. Biotech foods, I call them, but also known as foods involving genetic modification, or GMOs. Our opposition is based on the science, on the adequacy of the existing regulatory framework, what's best for Rhode Island's economic development, and really, in some sense, the most important thing is the social justice imperative to facilitate, not hinder, our ability to, quote-unquote, feed the world. Since 1986, the Food and Drug Administration, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration, the Environmental Protection Agency, the U.S. Department of Agriculture have regulated biotech research and commercial products under an extensive safety net of federal laws, collectively known as the Coordinated Framework. The FDA's longstanding scientific judgment is that there is no significant difference between foods produced using bioengineering as a class and their conventional counterparts. The FDA's scientific evaluation of bioengineered foods continues to show that the foods are safe as their conventional counterparts. Perhaps the most important practical regulatory fact is that the U.S. Department of Agriculture's regulations governing the organic label. The USDA rules define organic as not containing GM ingredients. If a consumer wishes to avoid GM foods, such foods are available and clearly identified through the organic label. Finally, it should not be overlooked that labeling laws will increase food costs, the actual labeling itself, but more importantly, all the rules, the regulations, the investigations, the personnel that would be part of the labeling enforcement process. And labeling by one state or region of a subset of foods weighs down Rhode Island's commerce with a Rhode Island-specific cost. If labeling were deemed to have value, which as you'll hear in the rest of my testimony, I don't think it does, a federal 50-state approach makes a lot more common sense. And as I think has been mentioned, and as many of you are aware, there are several bills and several concepts in the U.S. Congress for advocating for a 50-state solution. Now, just onto the science. I would start by saying a Pew Research Center survey, a very good survey, found that 88% of scientists view GM foods as safe to eat. This 88% is actually greater than the percentage of scientists who believe climate change is mostly due to human activity. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration has consistently held, I'm quoting, that there is no significant difference between foods produced using bioengineering as a class and their conventional counterparts. The American Medical Association has said there is no scientific justification for special labeling of bioengineered foods. The American Association for the Advancement of Sciences has stated the FDA does not require labeling of foods based on the specific genetic modification procedure used in the development of the crops. Legally mandating such a label can only serve to mislead and falsely alarm consumers. Why the scientific consensus favoring GM biotech foods and opposing labeling? Foods containing biotech ingredients are compositionally the same as conventionally produced foods. In a sense, this is the crux of the argument against GM labeling. There is a disconnect to it, affixing a scarlet letter to imply a substantive difference between GM and non-GM foods when no such difference exists. There would be a substantive price to pay, however, scaring consumers away from GM foods, causing them to spend more on groceries than they need to. Farmers have been genetically modifying crops for thousands of years. Use of biotechnology in plant science is a means to speed and, in fact, make safer traditional crossbreeding. Consider this. When plants are crossbred for a particular trait, the old-fashioned way, say a peanut plant or for drought tolerance, the trait may be produced, but in the process, many other things are altered. And when you think of that genome and you unravel it and then you put it together as you crossbreed, everything is getting mixed up. So something unforeseen could happen. If you get what you want, the trait that you want, you don't really care, you don't spend the time and money to figure out all the other things you've done. Biotechnology is much more precise. Rather than mixing and matching an entire plant genome, only the single gene or a very small number of genes for a particular trait are targeted. There is so much evidence demonstrating the safety and value of biotechnology applied to food crops. I'd be happy to supply you with a lot of studies and information. Please do not hesitate to ask. Now, a comment about economic development. Perhaps the most important reason for our opposition to these labeling bills is that it undermines the foundation, the hospitable environment for biotech you in this General Assembly, have all worked so hard to build. The message we have worked so hard to deliver is that we in Rhode Island and across New England are open for research and open for business. There is, we try to communicate, no fear to be had that labs or businesses will be weighted down with policy debates the scientific community has long ago put to rest. Rhode Island is a high-cost state, but one with much high-value added intellectual property to sell to the world. The higher living standards Rhode Island enjoys depend on creating more of that intellectual property. Rhode Island must continue to be confidently known as a hospitable place to science and rational analysis. House Bills 7082 and 7274 would notably be counter to that message. Finally, there's an important social justice issue to consider. Biotechnology, as it is applied to food production, is part of a centuries-long continuum of using science, from monks employing Mendelian genetics to Nobel laureate Norman Borlaug's post-World War II Green Revolution. The science of food production has allowed us to feed the hungry and free most of us from the need to farm, allowing us to use our time, talents, and treasure for other pursuits. It would be a shame if some of us non-farmers in the first world, willing and able to reduce the supply of food to pay more for it, mostly to assuage our romanticized notions of what constitutes proper farming, caused food costs to rise for everyone. Higher food costs mean fewer resources for education, housing, healthcare, transportation. Should we really incur such a price and impose it on the developing world, as well as those struggling economically in our own state and in our own country? when the science isn't here to justify it. I'll close with a comment about the cacophony of voices opposed to GM biotech foods. You have and will hear a great deal from these advocates. All I will say here is to ask you to review carefully the science proving the safety and value of biotech foods, and as importantly, to review carefully the studies and arguments put forth by the opponents of biotech foods. Who are these studies' authors? Is there expertise in science, biotechnology, food science? Are the conclusions and facts and data and analysis found in and cited by highly regarded journals of science? Are the studies reviewed, so to speak, by the choir or impartially peer-reviewed? We should be mindful not to allow a false equivalency narrative to develop, that there's science of equal weight on both sides of the GM issue. That is simply far, far from the case. In the recent outbreaks of measles resulting from misinformation about vaccine safety, we have seen the distortions and harm that occur when such a false equivalency narrative takes hold. The science is overwhelmingly supportive of the value and safety of GM foods. Thank you very much for your time, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Dr. Pascatello, do you have written copies of your testimony?
I do.
Give them to the clerk, and we'll enter them into the record. Are there any? Yes, Representative Canario.
I have a couple of questions, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Doctor, for your testimony. I have a question. You have a lot of, it seems as though you have a lot of scientific background. How would you answer the question then, why the United States has the highest rate of cancer in the world, and why the 64 countries and 28 nations who have either banned GMOs or put GMO labeling have their cancer rates have diminished a great deal? What would be your answer to that?
Well, I'd have to look at those studies, so I'm not sure that that's accurate. I would urge you to look at the American Cancer Society website. The cancer rate, and we are benefiting, and we're also, in some sense, a good problem to have, but we're suffering from an explosion of information. So we are way more aware of all the risks around us, but actually, life is getting better, safer. And the cancer rate, if you look on the American Cancer Society, it's actually declining. I mean, slightly, but there has been, all the research has, in some sense, paid off, all the knowledge. So despite all the worries about all these things in our environment, the cancer rate is actually going down.
So information is a wonderful thing.
It is, yeah.
And that's why I put it in my bill, because information about genetically modified organisms, I think, is a right-to-know issue. And the more information people have, they can make decisions, which leads me to my next question. If you want to avoid sugar, aspartame, trans fats, MSG, all you got to do is read the label. If people have certain allergies to that, why not add GMO? This product contains GMO. What's the big harm in that? It's information, and it's people's right to know. What's the big harm in that?
I mean, I think it's sort of a fundamental, kind of a disagreement over what GM foods are, and so our argument is that they are compositionally the same. So it's almost misleading consumers to, as I said in my testimony, it's almost like giving a scarlet letter to something and implying that there's something wrong with it or something fundamentally different about it, when there actually isn't something fundamentally different about it.
Well, let's just.
I think Representative Canario, the two of you can have like a sidebar conversation, but he's given his perspective. Could we move? I'd love to hear from many of the witnesses that are here.
Just one more question.
One more question. A question.
I guess my question is, if the foods are already labeled with certain ingredients, and why would the biochemic industry be against labeling food just to say that the food's been genetically modified? Because as a consumer, I look at the label and I see all these things, contain so much fat. I, as a consumer, just want to know if it's genetically modified. That's all. And then it doesn't stop me from buying it, but it might stop the next person from buying it because they don't want to consume foods that have been genetically modified. That's my question.
And again, it gets to the issue, do you think that the two foods there is something fundamentally different requiring disclosure, or are you actually misleading people to think that there's a difference when none exists?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Doctor. Any further? Representative Handy, question?
In fact, you don't have to necessarily answer, but I just on the issue about 88% of scientists piece there, I just want to remind people too that when you talk about climate scientists, you're actually talking about 97% of climate scientists are there. I'd say you guys might want to look at surveys of scientists that are specifically a bit more savvy on that. Like if you talk to me how many climate scientists are concerned about genetically modified foods, I'd probably be a lot less motivated by that answer compared to something specific.
The Pew Research Center, I mean, the study was a cross-section of credentialed scientists about various issues, including climate change. It wasn't just climate change scientists. So it was just, I mean, I thought that was a very powerful, because I think that, people who believe in science and rational understanding and use of data, come to the conclusion that there is climate change occurring, and there's a significant component of it is due to human activity, and so it's interesting that those scientists, when they look at what's going to happen over the next 10 years, 20 years, 30 years in terms of feeding the world, that we really need this technology, and it's a good thing. Like this is good. It's something we want to be behind in Rhode Island. We want those jobs. We want those earnest scientists doing this good work. It's amazing. It's amazingly good. It's a good thing.
Representative Lancian.
Yes, just very quickly, thank you for what you've all your statements and everything. To me, I mean, just on the surface, just looking quickly, it appears that it's a matter of people wanting these three bills to label the foods versus not labeling them. And you're saying that these foods are great and everything. You're saying it's great and you don't see any difference. So if that's the case, it would appear to me that, let's label them, and because they're so good and everything. I mean, it's just an additional step. I don't see
Not the Jerry Springer show.
I don't see if it's so good and everything. I mean, it's just an additional step. That's what I see. So I appreciate everything you've said, but it seems to be a simple matter of labeling versus not labeling. I think you're saying there might be, it's good. So I wouldn't think there'd be a fair, but that's me.
I mean, my point is that you're implying a difference. That you're saying that it's misleading consumers by not letting them see.
I'm not saying misleading. I'm saying inform. I'm not saying mislead. I'm saying inform. And so we both agree that that I would hope we'd agree that let's inform. And you think it's good. Maybe somebody else doesn't, but at least we're informing people. That's all I'm saying.
It's just a piece of information that doesn't get to the nutritional value or the
absolutely not. But you can state your case in advertising like they do, all the time. Thank you.
You're both going to disagree. You have one opinion. You have another opinion.
Can I say just one comment?
Quick, yeah.
Just about the information thing. When you go down that road of I want this is information that perhaps there isn't, you might admit that there isn't any difference between the two GM and non-GM, and then you're saying, well, I just want to know, and where does that stop? I could say, I want to know I want all foods to be labeled whether they were free trade, fair trade. And that might be, and that might be, but
some people decide to buy or not buy based on whether it's free trade or not.
All right,
again, it is a step.
All right.
Seems like a no-brainer.
Yeah.
I could say I want legislation to that effect, and then I might want to know union food, not. I mean, who knows?
That's good.
All good things, but
a question. Representative Price.
Thank you, Chairman.
Question.
John. Hello. It says genetically modified organism. So you're talking about splicing plants with plants, plants with insects. Because I know there was mention of eels with fish, and the science moving forward. Where's when would we start being able to be informed on what exactly you're splicing together, and and what would be the long-term effects of some of the stuff that you're just creating?
Right. I mean, there's exciting science, unbelievably exciting science going on, but the foods that we're talking about are, just inserting different genes of different versions of the same crop. So a taller corn plant with to a shorter corn plant, or that kind of thing.
Okay. I think he's just saying it's foods, seeds. Any one more question. A question.
So is there some research that's splicing, other things with the food? Maybe.
He's talking about cross species.
There's definitely science there. There are no products like that, and that would be a whole different regulatory.
I think that movie's
review.
playing at the showcase.
I think we might be living the movie, Chairman.
Are there any further questions? Thank you, Doctor. Thank you very much, Dr.
Thank you.
Pescatello.
Thank you all.
very
Thank you
much.
all. Yeah.
Next, we have also, as part of this opposition, Mr. Henry Wright from the Rhode Island Farm Bureau, followed by former Representative Wayne Salisbury. Welcome, Mr. Wright.
Evening. Thank you, Chairman McNamara, and thank you, distinguished committee members. I'm glad I have the opportunity to speak before you. I am president of the Rhode Island Farm Bureau. We are part of the American Farm Bureau. We're a fast-growing agricultural association. Rhode Island should be proud because Rhode Island was the first state to make quota this year in American Farm Bureau. So we are alive and growing. I represent all kinds of farmers, organic, as we call them, conventional farmers, and conventional farmers that are using GMO. I will also say that many organic farmers, they don't realize it, but they're growing GMOs that were developed about 5,000 to 9,000 years ago. So this has been an ongoing thing. I'm not here to speak today on the pros and cons, except because of the miracle of GMO. We're producing about at least 33% more food today in the world than we would be without it. The other miracle, which is a little older, was hybrids. And between the two of them, we're producing over 60% more food today than we were in 1950 when hybrids first came along. Getting back to the subject of today on the bills, we're looking for a level playing field. Right now in Rhode Island, you are able to purchase products that say non-GMO. We believe in a free market system. When there's a void, a niche, somebody will always fill it if they can think they can make a better profit than the other way. So we feel that it's available in Rhode Island. Now, we at American Farm Bureau are in favor of a national bill that's correct, and we've been working on it. Last year, we thought we had a fairly good bill going forward. The Rhode Island delegation in the House voted against it. So anybody that's really pro-GMOs, you should contact your representatives and say we need a national bill, because the last thing we need is Rhode Island out in left field. There's too many things today that we're a small state. Everybody can drive to a neighboring state very quickly. Especially the problem comes back to where there's a real growth is in our farmers' markets. Some of our biggest farmers' markets are only 5 to 10 minutes from a neighboring state farmers' market. So people have the choice. And non-GMO and organic will always raise the price of food. There's just no way around it. The difference is so great that you'll always be paying more for non-GMO or for a so-called organic product. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Wright? Thank you very much, Mr. Wright.
Thank you.
Mr. Honorable Wayne Salisbury, Salisbury Farm, retired math teacher. And Mr. Salisbury, first I want to thank you for giving me, with your corn maze, the answer. So it only took me 45 minutes to get out of it, the escape route. I really appreciate that. Welcome.
We try to, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, we try to do that to special people we know so that they can get out without having to send the rescue parties in to get them. It is a pleasure to be here. And as Henry, one of the things I've learned after spending many years over here with this gentleman and others, is that when it's all been said before, you don't have to spend too much time repeating what they said. I'll try to adhere to that, but as a former representative, he may have to bang the gavel a couple of times now. It's been said by a couple of people before that we don't have the choice. I think we do have a choice. We have a choice if you want to be, or if somebody wants to label their products as non-GMO, they should do it. We're not saying you can't. If you want a choice to buy organic, you have that choice. One of the comments that was made by one of the previous witnesses was that Campbell, and I'm only going to touch on a couple of these, but Campbell has decided to label their products. And what wasn't said is that they have decided their label, and I have nothing against this if they want to do it, their label is simply going to say, this product may contain genetically modified foods. And for a manufacturer of foods, it's awfully hard to get away from it, considering that some 80%, I believe it's 80%, and I could be off by a few points, 80% of the soybeans, which seems to be in every product in the country, they're genetically modified. Corn is also very high, but I don't know what the numbers are. So they've covered themselves that way. If that's what everybody wants to do, we don't have a problem with it. What I do have a problem with is trying to give the impression that because something is labeled non-GMO, it's any better than what the product that doesn't carry that label is. And we've heard our friend, the good doctor, talk about there's no, at least they haven't found any yet. I would like to see them do more studies on it so that we could have a definite answer. Not a study by somebody who is pro-labeling or a study that's against pro-labeling. But maybe we'll finally get the answer when they do that. But right now, I don't see a whole heck of a lot of difference or a whole heck of a lot of reason to go that road. I'd like to put some personal stuff in here, which some may understand, some may not. As the chairman said, I operate a farm in Johnston, Rhode Island. We tried to get rid of one rep, but he came back. In any case, I've always grown and sell at my farm stand, mostly at my farm stand, sweet corn. It's a big product, big sale. Initially, when GMOs came out, I decided to try them. Over the last couple of years, I've cut it out 99%. I did plant one little patch of GMOs this year because I ran out of seed, and I couldn't get the seed I needed, so I planted some. The reason I stopped is because the question that this whole issue has engendered. However, for the life of the farmer, and again, I've gone away from it, for the life of the farmer, and that's me, GMOs may be a better choice because I don't have to be spraying other things on my field, getting them in the atmosphere. Some of those things are used by organic growers. By the way, on certain crops I use organic products. That's all I do. But in the corn, I found that I have to have a balance. I can use BT, which is one of the chemicals that's engineered into this corn, to stop the bugs from consuming everything. Now, the point is that if I grow a GMO, or those that do, they maybe can spray their product, sweet corn, I'm talking about, once a year. Going back to the conventional procedures and the conventional product, I'm having to spray 4 and 5 times to keep the worms out. Now, everybody can talk about the fact that they don't mind the worms, but let me tell you, as a producer, if I have the stand full of corn that has worms, they go to my neighbor. And it's as simple as that. It's also much more expensive because these things that you're spraying aren't cheap. And some of them are organic. I will stop there and answer any questions that you might have or leave room for the next guy to come up and talk to you.
Any questions for Mr. Salisbury? Thank you very much, Wayne.
Thank you.
And thanks again for the map
Good to
out
see
of
you
the
again.
corn maze. Good to see you. Joey Lindbeck from the AG's office has written testimony, and she mentioned some concerns with the jurisdictional aspect of this. Lenny Lopes is here in support of the legislation for the Rhode Island State Nurses Association and is not speaking. Chris Miller from representing Ben and Jerry's. So now we'll start timing the remainder of the witnesses on these three bills. 2 minutes. And welcome, Mr. Miller from Ben and Jerry's.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the committee, for taking testimony on these important bills. I've submitted some written testimony, so I'm not going to touch on those issues, but my testimony does speak to the issue of whether or not minor label changes would lead to an increase in food prices, and the answer to that question is no. Let me also say that what you're contemplating here, requiring the disclosure of GMOs, it does not impact in the least the biotech industry, medical research. In fact, it doesn't impact farmers. It would impact companies like mine. It would require companies like mine to disclose whether or not products have GMOs. It has nothing to do or would not have any impact on what a farmer may or may not plant. Let me also touch briefly on a couple of other issues raised. The first is the issue of safety. This is not a question of science or whether or not GMOs are safe. We do not allow food companies to label unsafe products and sell them to consumers. Concentrated orange juice requires disclosure. Farm-raised salmon requires disclosure. Artificial sweeteners require disclosure. Artificial colors require disclosure, not because they are unsafe, but because they are different. And to the point of GMOs and whether or not they are different, by definition, GMOs are patented seeds. They must be different in order to hold a patent. So the argument that they are indistinguishable from their conventional counterparts is not accurate. So, to be clear, this is a simple issue. It is about transparency in food. It is about companies being proud to tell consumers what's in the products they're selling. And I would urge the legislators to join Vermont in requiring disclosure of genetically engineered ingredients. Happy to answer any questions.
For Mr. Miller? Thank you very much, Mr. Miller. Thank you. Gene Harrington from, I think, Bio is opposed to this, not speaking. And Paul LaRoche from the GMO, the Realtor. Is it the Realty Association?
Yes.
Paul, welcome.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Paul DeRoche. Since you're an educator, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to take 2 bites at the apple. The first bite is the piece of 4-page letter data from the GMO Grocery Manufacturers Association opposing the bill. And the second bite is on behalf of the Retail Federation, which operates under the umbrella of the chamber, we also oppose it. And thank you for giving me 2 bites of the apple.
Thank you. Thank you. As long as it's labeled. No. Thank you. Carolyn Murray from the Rhode Island Beverage Association is opposed to this and is not speaking. And the next witness is Michael Hansen, the Consumer Union. Welcome, Michael. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and members of the committee. My name is Michael Hansen. I'm a senior scientist at Consumers Union. We've been working on this issue for decades, and I've actually served as an international expert on how to do safety assessments for genetically engineered animals. I have prepared testimony. You can read that. Just a few comments I'd like to make here. First, genetic engineering is very different than conventional breeding. The definition that's in the bill is the same definition that has been agreed upon globally by Codex Alimentarius. That's the food standard setting organization of the UN, and it's actually written into the World Trade Organization. And I should just point out that they spent 8 years developing how to do proper safety assessments for these engineered crops. We don't do that in the United States. The FDA does not require safety assessments. There are There are some safety issues. You can read about that in my testimony. I'd like to end by talking about the legal challenge, and that is if you look at what the U.S. District Court for the District of Vermont announced in April 2015. They turned down the request of the Grocery Manufacturers Association and their allies for an injunction against Vermont's mandatory labeling laws. The court decided that labels such as, quote, produced with genetic engineering or partially produced with genetic engineering do not violate the Commerce Clause of the Constitution, are not preempted by federal law, and do not violate the First Amendment of the companies producing GE foods. The court also dismissed the idea that GE labeling is only based on a desire to gratify consumer curiosity. What the court stated is, quote, the safety of food products, the protection of the environment, and the accommodation of religious beliefs and practices are all quintessential government interests, as is the state's desire to, quote, promote informed consumer decision-making. They also said this is not political speech. It's not controversial.
Good finish. Are there any questions for this witness? Representative Handy.
So I appreciate you coming from the consumer union. Obviously, the consumer reports and things like that are where you guys come from, and obviously then you're not funded by the folks that are making something. And I guess that's where my anxiety sometimes comes up on safety questions when a lot of I just wanted to ask you, can you correct me if I'm wrong, that the FDA tends to rely a lot more on the data that's provided by the manufacturer on that question in terms of the safety of the product and the...
That's correct. All they do is this is all data that comes from the companies, and surprisingly, except for example, the salmon, the FDA doesn't actually make conclusions about the safety of any of these crops. They just say that the companies assume that they're safe.
Thank you. Any further questions for this witness? Thank you very much, sir. Next, we have Terrence Martesian, the Rhode Island Hospitality Association, and he is in opposition to this legislation. Also, we have Margaret Sweeney has signed up in opposition from the Rhode Island Food Dealers Association. Liz is a Godania, Rhode Island Right to Know. Liz, welcome. What is it?
Guardia.
Guardia. Oh,
like LaGuardia
just like the
Airport.
airport.
Exactly.
Except you don't lose your luggage here, right? Welcome, and please proceed.
Thank you, everybody. And I also have my partner, Mike, here with me. And we're expecting our first non-GMO baby in July. And we're really lucky to actually be able to say that because we do a lot of research and we spend a lot more money than most people do on our food because it's really important for us. It's a little frustrating for me to sit here and listen to scientists tell me that it's safe because I don't think that matters. I just really want to know it's my food. I'm not a scientist, but I care, and I want that information, and I'm really relying on you guys to help me get that. I also would like to say that we just got back from India. Well, not just got back, but we were in India for about a month earlier this year, and GMOs are responsible for almost 300,000 lives lost. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Indian farmer suicides, but they planted genetically modified cotton and they lost nearly 80% of their crops. And that was because the GM crops were very fragile to any change in the climate. And they had a drought, and these farmers spent all of their money because they were promised that it was going to be better, get higher yields. And we worked with the woman who's actually helping to fight Monsanto in India. That's aside. Really, I just want to know, and I want everyone to have access to that information to be able to make their own choices. And I'd like to invite Mike maybe to say over.
I mean, just from a business perspective, I mean, it's free market capitalism. If you don't have the information, you can't make the right decision. I just say let the public make the decision if they want to eat GMO or not. Simple as that.
Thank you. Any questions for the Guardians? Hey, congratulations.
Thank you.
Good job.
Thank you.
Martin DiGoberto, Citizens for GMO Labeling.
Thank you, Chairman. community members. It's Martin Dagoberto Driggs. I was actually born in Woonsocket, grew up in Blackstone, and before I became an advocate for transparency and labeling, I earned my bachelor's degree in biotechnology and genetics from Worcester Polytechnic Institute. Wow. And it was there that I gained an appreciation not only for the promise of technology. By no means do I consider myself anti-GMO. But I also gained an appreciation for the magnitude of risks that we're taking with genetic engineering. And anyone who tries to say that modern genetically engineered crops are no different than the traditionally bred crops that have been around for millennia is preying on the ignorance of the public. When I was earning my degree, we learned there's old biotech, the way we've been doing things for generations, and there's new biotech, working at the molecular level. The currently commercialized GMO crops that were produced, figuratively, thinking almost literally, shooting from the hip. They take gold particles coated with genes and shoot them into the plant cells. That is not precise. Of course, there are new measures that are more precise, but we're talking about what is currently in the food supply that has not been through, in my opinion, the proper third-party safety tests. And, I've been organizing in Massachusetts on the GMO labeling bill there that has a majority of support, and we're working across the country to pass uniform, common sense, clear, conspicuous, on-package labeling so that consumers can make an informed choice about what they're eating and what they're supporting with their food purchases, because there's no shortage of legitimate concerns beyond health concerns. There's the environmental concerns, religious, moral, spiritual concerns, and like Mike said, this is a free market. We should have information so we can choose the sectors of the economy that we would like to support. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Yes. Representative McLaughlin, a question.
Yes. I would like to know, you've heard so much about, the foods, how they change the foods, especially the crops that we produce, and a lot has to be said. My question to you is, in reference to cows, cattle and stuff like GMOs, used in their feed and everything else, how does that affect the animals?
Well, unfortunately, there's pitifully few independent, peer-reviewed animal feeding studies. But those that we do have, link the consumption of genetically engineered foods to such things as faulty insulin regulation, immune problems, infertility, multiple types of cancer. And while the jury is still out, we need more science, we need more research. But in the meantime, this is just about giving information. Also, the FDA even said we need labeling and tracking so we can see what the impact is on public health. You'll hear that trillions of meals have been served and we haven't seen anyone drop dead. Well, of course, you wouldn't see the chronic effects over time if you're not looking for them. So we need labeling so we can see what the impacts are.
And these studies are just in animals.
Right.
Wow.
There's no long-term human feeding studies.
Very good. Thank you, Representative.
Us right here, so.
Thank you, Mr. DiGilberto.
Thank you.
WPI, great school, huh?
Yeah, it was great. My little brother's there now studying game design, so it's quite
beautiful,
something.
Beautiful. Hey, thank you very much for your testimony.
Hey, thank you.
John, I think it's Halshin, kind of Mickey Mantle, signed up. John, going once. Oh, good, John. Welcome. Oh, Holson. Okay. I remember you from last year. Farm.
Yes. My wife Joyce and I run the Good Earth Organic Garden Center, and we also have a certified organic vegetable farm.
And John, could you give the location so people at home
yes,
will know?
We're 1800 Situate Avenue in Western Cranston, right at the intersection of Pippin Orchard Road and Situate Avenue.
And you're open, is it seasonally, John?
Yes.
Okay, and so you'll
pretty
be
much from early spring until late fall. Yeah.
Okay, and that won't take out of your time. Okay. But welcome, please proceed.
Thank you. Well, a lot of people have already said a lot of the things that I wanted to say, but I did want to comment on a few of the comments that I've heard made. And again, I'm not the only one to have picked up on this, obviously. But there is, without a doubt, a drastic difference between hybridized crops, the corn that was mentioned before, and the genetically modified crops, because this involves, as the last speaker said, engineering on a molecular level, which has never been done before. So, and the fact that plants are patented, and these are two very distinct differences. One of the other speakers mentioned that GMOs were, a boon to humanity, essentially. And if they're so proud of it, why are they so reluctant to label the products as such? If they're so wonderful, why not let the world know that they're in there? I did submit written testimony today, and I just want to touch on a few things from that. There were a lot of promises that GM technology made in the beginning, including increased yield of crops, reduced pesticide and herbicide use, safe for the environment, safe to eat and more nutritious, strictly regulated for safety. Most of these, all of these things have not proven to be the case. In most cases, the yields are the same or less than conventionally grown crops. They do not solve the problems of world hunger because there are a lot of other issues. There's actually been a marked increase in the use of herbicides, especially the Roundup, because those crops are immune to its effects. So there's a lot more of the Roundup being used, and it's been proven now in a lot of studies to be carcinogenic properties. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, John. Any questions? Thank you very much. Ben Copper from Wild Harmony Farm. And Lillian Cataldi will be up next. Yes, welcome.
Hi, I'm Ben Kerper from Wild Harmony Farm in Exeter. About 10 years ago, I became so sick that I had to move home. I couldn't work. I was sleeping 16 hours a day, and after countless misdiagnoses, it turned out that I just had food intolerances. I can't eat wheat, milk, or sugar. And so I was forced to read every ingredient label on all food. Those are such common ingredients. And by simply avoiding those foods, I was back to full health within a few months. So I'm forever grateful for the labeling on food that enabled my recovery. During my recovery, I learned much more than I ever expected about food. Of particular interest to me were topics where consumers were misguided, uninformed, or outright deceived about what they were eating. I quickly realized that the only way I could totally trust the food I was eating was to learn how to grow it myself. This led me to start Wild Harmony Farm to be a completely transparent and honest food producer, with the goal of bringing awareness to consumers about the reality of the agricultural industry. We're now the only certified organic livestock farm in Rhode Island. Regardless of what the studies say, some of them say that GMOs are perfectly fine. A lot of them say that they aren't fine. That's not what this is about. This is about whether genetic engineering is the greatest bioengineering feat or the most detrimental disaster. This is about the transparency of our food system, the honest relationships between producers and consumers, the freedom to make informed decisions, and the ability to decide which companies we want our food dollars to support. Thank you.
And Ben, could you how about a plug for your farm? Where is it located?
We're in Exeter, Rhode Island.
Whereabouts in Exeter, Rhode Island?
On the corner of 102 and Route 3.
And do you sell to the public?
We do. We have a CSA and a farm store there.
And when are you open?
Our CSA pickup is the first Thursday of every month, 4 to 7, and that's when our store is open to the public, and otherwise it's just by arrangement.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for this witness? Thank you very much for your testimony. Elizabeth Beckman is here, and we want to get her out of order, but her beautiful little daughter is bedtime. Yeah, she's been a good witness tonight.
Yes.
Welcome, Elizabeth. Please proceed.
Thank you.
Ms. Beckman.
This is the third year in a row that I've been here just asking for labeling on the food. The basis of your health is what you eat. You are what you eat. I know that I am, and everyone else that I've met. And I choose to feed my family in a way that is very hard to do if things aren't labeled. And so I'm just here again asking for food to be labeled that is labeled in over 60 other countries in that way. Even the companies that are from here are have labels, if you look it up, that are from Europe and different other places of the world where they do label genetically modified things. So I'm just here asking again for transparency, because if we have transparency, then we can have a choice of what we're eating. Thank you.
And Elizabeth, what's your daughter's name?
This is Eden.
Oh, it's Eden.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
Just like the Garden of Eden.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Very good.
Yep,
Very
she's been
well.
at this day house since she was 2 weeks old.
Yeah, she's very well behaved.
Mm-hmm. She's very healthy and well fed too.
Beautiful. Are there any questions for this witness?
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Lillian Cataldi, please. Cataldi, is it Sims? Simmons. Welcome.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members, for hearing my words. I am not a scientist. I am a college-educated, many years old woman who's been a mother for 35 years and a farmer in my own garden. And I'm just here to advocate to have this bill passed. It is about transparency. It is about our right to know. And I do represent others that aren't here today. Although I'm not a scientist, I can tell you, Mr. Chairman, that you're on a molecular level the same as that sofa behind you, but I would not mistake you for that sofa. Okay? So, yeah, we're alike. We're all made of the same stuff. But that doesn't fly. Again, it is not about if GMOs are good or bad. If you pass this bill, that doesn't mean we all have to become vegan and eat organic food. By the way, there's a difference. There's a whole middle section between GMO and organic. There's a whole, no one talks about that, the science behind, the people who oppose this bill. Don't talk about the fact that there's food that isn't organic, but it's also not GMO. You might ask that question of them the next time they get up here. We come to you. You are the guys that hold the power here, because we can't come to the federal government because Monsanto owns Washington. Simple, in my humble opinion, okay? So we need to do this on a state level. And as a representative of other people who can't be here with me today, and for myself, I ask you to seriously give us our right to know. I don't care to eat organic, okay? I don't have to eat organic, but I do want to know. Okay, that's all I have to tell you, and I thank you for your time.
Well said. Thank you. Are there any questions for this witness? Thank you very much. Maxon B. Hentz of Hindale Farm had to leave, and he was here in support of the bill. Karen Salvatore, welcome.
Thank you, Representative McNamara.
Good to see you. How
Thank
are you?
Same here.
Former Miss Rhode Island.
Yes.
Yeah, just
Former
so everyone
star
knows.
football player for Pilgrim High School.
Thank you.
There's nothing so uncommon as common sense. If GMOs were good for you, the manufacturers would be happy to let us know that there's genetically modified organisms in the food that we are eating. With regard to Mr. Hull's bill, could you report out 2 bills, or can you only report out 1?
We're the Rhode Island House of Representatives. We could report out 2.
Beautiful. Because what I like about that bill is it raises consciousness.
Or combine them.
Right. So I would encourage you to do that. And I'd also like to say that the incestuous relationship between the Food and Drug Administration and Monsanto and Cargill and the multi-billion-dollar corporations is well documented. We know we cannot count on our federal government. We are counting on you. We need you to pass these bills. Please do so. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Excellent, Ms. Salvatore. Good to see you, Karen. Thank you so much for coming out tonight. Amanda Freitas, please. Amanda? You didn't? Okay. And you are here in support of the bill. And also Danielle Dispatch is signed up in support of this legislation. Elizabeth Daniels is also here in support of the legislation. And Paul McComsky from the Ocean House. Is Paul here also in support of the legislation? Ben, is it Cooper, Harmony Farm? Did we hear from Ben? Is he? Yes. We already did. Thank you. And Mark Henson, are these repeated? I thought, did we hear from Mark yet?
That was a different one.
of Northeast Organic Farming is here in support of the legislation. Jan Martin of NOFA. Jan, what is the acronym for?
Northeast Organic Farmers Association.
Welcome. Please proceed. You want a hand?
I'm good. I do this all summer. This just happens to be off-season, or actually late in the fall.
Pretty good looking squash.
I thought so. Thank you. I'm Jan Martin. I'm here on behalf of the Northeast Organic Farmers Association. We're an organization of farmers, gardeners, and consumers that are very concerned with health-related food issues. We strongly support passing this bill because of the residents of Rhode Island have a right to know. It actually would behoove the organic farmers to not have this bill passed. If everybody had to buy organic in order to avoid GMOs, it seems as though at surface level it would be good for business. That is not the case. People will be forced to, because of lack of access, because of lack of access to organic, because sometimes the prices are higher, not always, so they would be forced to simply buy food that they didn't know about. As the previous person spoke, that there's a big range in the middle between the extreme GMO crops and the organics, and that's where we need the labeling. We need to have the labeling in the middle for sure. Pardon me for a second here. This is not an issue of factory farm versus organics. Okay, the factory farms are known huge pollutants contributing to the environmental disasters, et cetera. It's an issue of health in our foods. Okay, and my preference, I love this bill. I love the idea of having it labeled. But my preference would be that we ask the family farmer, not the family farmers, the factory farmers, the big ag, to please label what poisons and toxins they're putting on the soil and on our food. Thank you.
Do you need a hand with the... Go ahead.
You want a hand with it? Oh, I forgot. One more question. How many people here know what this is?
It's a gourd, right?
Is it a gourd?
Okay. Yeah. It's actually a Hubbard squash.
That's a Hubbard squash.
A Hubbard squash. Wouldn't it be nice if it was just labeled?
Wow. Oh, she's got it. Okay, thanks. Do you have a copy of your testimony? We can copy it if you would like it submitted for the record.
Did that sound like it was a scripted?
No. But if you have written testimony, we will enter it into the record if you'd like. Okay. Oops. Okay. Lauren Wilson. Lauren Wilson, also NOFA, is signed up in support of this. We get Karen Salvatore already. And Terrence Martesian was called earlier, but he can... Thanks. Terrence can come up. Mr. Martesian. He knows the 2-minute drill. Welcome. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I apologize, but I've been in a couple other committees, so I knew this was going to last a little bit longer. So anyway, Terry Martesian, representing the Rhode Island Hospitality Association and the theater owners of New England, and we want to be on record as opposed to these bills. Food and food products that we obtain come from numerous sources, and to require us to be required to label them would be impossible to do. That's something maybe the manufacturer or the retailer, other than us, should be responsible for before they put the product on the market for sale in Rhode Island. But the problem is that when you have a restaurant, and theater owners do have restaurants, it's almost impossible for us to trace the products in food products and in the foods that we use or the ingredients we use to make food for you people to consume. And I remember a couple of years ago, my law partner, Lynette Boiselle, I believe, came in with soup, and she handed this out. And some of the soups that we make in some of the restaurants, soups alone, have 20-some ingredients. And where they all come from, we don't know. We have no idea, because we're buying our supplies, just you're buying it from the grocery store, we're buying it from distributors. And it's impossible for us to keep on top of that. We would never be able to comply with the law as it's presently existed. Anyway, the FDA, USDA, EPA have all determined that foods...
20 seconds.
20 seconds?
Yep.
All right. I believe that we're end users also, and if you're going to pass a particular bill, you have to seriously consider an exemption for restaurants, movie theaters, and other places of assembly that provide food, that sell food, that distribute food to the consumer. I will submit my testimony in writing to save time, and I'll also submit this list showing the number of ingredients that we have to deal with. But for the record, we are strongly opposed to these bills as presently drafted.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Martesian? Yes. Representative McLaughlin. Question.
Mr. Martesian, you brought up a very good point, and I'm hoping anybody in this room can answer me this. I like to get in depth in things. I'm sitting here saying, let's see, I can't mention the name of the supermarket because that would be promoting business. But I go in and I love to get a bucket of chicken soup.
Sounds like Dave's.
And I'm sitting here, I'm wondering, have we gone far enough with this bill as far as, labeling if there's any GMOs?
Yeah, restaurants, if we look at the bill, restaurants are exempt in this legislation. So only packaged foods. So, but I do like that chicken soup, Representative McLaughlin.
Yeah, I'm hoping there's no GMOs in there.
I don't know. We're
Mr. Chairman, can I just make one comment? The problem with that is we get our supplies from manufacturers all over the country and the world. And if it passed a bill and we're an outlier, just like maybe Vermont is right now because they're in litigation over this, but all the other states around us that have passed this have made a contingent on other factors to be considered. Yeah. This one doesn't. We would be on our own, basically.
Any further questions? Thank you, Mr. Martesian. Next, we have Kathleen DiChiara, who is here in support.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner with specialized training in diets for chronic disease. I've devoted 2,500 hours in 7 years just looking specifically at the role that food plays in chronic disease. I'm going to speak today specifically about a real-life example in my own home that serves as an example of what happens when we remove genetically modified foods and glyphosate from someone's diet outside of the biotech industry and laboratory walls. My third son developed anaphylactic and serious life-threatening allergies, but it wasn't until he developed a relentless case of eczema that left us most frustrated. We went to countless immunologists to identify what was at the root of this chronic condition, knowing that it was an immune-triggered reaction from his diet. Sadly, countless trips to well-credentialed and sophisticated immunologists left us with no answers. It was myself and my determination to discover what was at the root of his body's inflamed, bleeding, relentless itching that was directly related to genetically modified ingredients hidden in 2 foods left in our house. We were already dye-free, processed-free, gluten-free, dairy-free, sugar-free, and we could not figure out why he was continuing to bleed and claw his skin. His entire body was covered. Within 3 weeks of removing 2 products that had canola oil and genetically modified corn, his chronic eczema was 100% gone and never returned. We have images that we've documented. We have the proof. If we subject his body to genetically modified ingredients, the condition does come back. So our son's reaction is not an isolated case. There are 54% of children today with chronic disease. This is exactly what's happening. We don't have safety studies on humans. We have less than 90 days of animal studies, and chronic diseases develop over 90 days. So we don't have a safe standard to say whether or not it's safe for our population. Thank you.
Very interesting story. I like that. It was very interesting. And what was it? Was it genetically modified corn?
And canola oil.
And canola oil. 2
ingredients.
Any questions? Sure. Thank you very much for your testimony. Next we have, it looks like Laudrey, maybe Flynn from UNFI. What is it? Laura Flynn. Okay. It's that movie, that swirl.
It's something like that.
Something like that.
Something like
Welcome.
that.
Ms.
Thank
Flynn,
you.
please proceed.
Thank you. My name is Laura Flynn. I am the National Director of Organizational Development at United Natural Foods, or UNFI. Here to present the testimony of Tom Zicki, who's our Chief Human Resources and Sustainability Officer, who's very disappointed he couldn't be here today. First, I'd like to thank the committee for hosting and to let you know that we encourage support of these bills. We are America's leading certified organic distributor, and we are the largest distributor of natural organic foods in North America. We are an $8 billion organization in your backyard in Providence, headquartered in Providence. We employ over 500 people in Providence and over 8,000 across the U.S. We proudly service 40,000 customers with over 80,000 products. And our customers want to know what they are eating. They want to know what is in their food. And they're not alone. As you heard, many people have quoted that over 90% of Americans support labeling of genetically modified food. They want to know what's in their food. Expanding the use of GMO crops has increased herbicide applications in the last 20 years by over 527 million pounds. As weeds and pests have become more and more resistant, farmers have been forced to resort to even more toxic weed and bug killers. And in fact, last year the EPA approved a toxic herbicide called Enlist Duo. That's a mix of glyphosate and 2,4-D, which has been linked to Parkinson's disease, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and reproductive problems. And even now, the EPA is reconsidering this as they've discovered how dangerous it is. We do not need GMO crops to feed the world. Yields of conventionally bred corn and soybeans have increased as much as yields of genetically engineered corn and soybeans. And U.S. farmers only produce 4% of the global staples. Food insecurity or hunger is caused by poverty, not food production. We actually produce twice as much food as we need, according to the UN. And voluntary labeling does not work. Since 2001, companies had the opportunity to do that, and they've not done it. There's been more confusion than ever.
No.
So we would say that we believe that these three acts present a common sense solution. We would like to see them move forward to provide our consumers and customers across the organization with the ability to make informed decisions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for this witness? Thank you. And next we have, it looks like a port. It's just a swirl with someone also, it's like one word, like Madonna. I don't know. Anyone that's...
A port?
A port. A port in the storm.
I haven't won yet. I'd be happy to.
And please, and you are, ma'am?
Laura Conti.
Welcome. Laura, it could be you, Laura Ponte, yes.
One of a kind. Might be.
You're ready for Hollywood.
I
Love the
am.
hat. Please proceed,
Thank you.
Laura.
Hello, good evening, and thank you. My name is Laura Conti, a born and raised Rhode Islander. I am here today in support of mandatory GMO labeling, a mere stepping stone in the pursuit of awareness. My journey into the realm of GMOs all began some years ago out of pure curiosity in consumer goods. At that time, there was already a buzz about GMOs, but I didn't know much about them. I began to explore all sorts of consumer goods, not just foods, but all products I used on a daily basis. How does it all happen? Who creates this? How do these products get introduced into the market? What's in it? Are there guidelines, regulations? Coming from a manufacturing background, I was very curious about this process, so I exposed myself to the industry I wanted to learn more about. If I stumbled on something I didn't quite understand, I would do more research. I can honestly say that many of the ingredients listed on these various products blew my mind. I never even heard of these ingredients, half of which I couldn't pronounce.
I had to face the harsh reality that I was really ignorant, not an easy thing to come to terms with in my personal journey of introspective thought. Here I am using and consuming this stuff, and I don't even know what's in it. I felt foolish, naive, duped, taken advantage of. But why? How did I not know? And so it all began, my quest for understanding. My findings were shocking. The more information I exposed myself to, the more questions I had. None of it ever made sense to me. I thought organizations like the FDA and the USDA monitored consumer goods. Aren't they supposed to protect the people? Isn't that the purpose of these organizations to exist in the first place? Don't they work for us? All that played over and over in my mind was why, how, this can't be. I didn't want to believe that ignorant Americans across the country were being taken advantage of. The omission of pertinent information to the consumer state of well-being is ethical. This level of doubt in the organizations created to protect the people casts a shadow of darkness that continues to grow in my eyes.
Wow, great finish line. Do you have written testimony there that we could? Would you like us to copy that so we can put it in the record? Okay. Are there any questions for this witness? Thank you very much. And M, it looks like SLU signed up in support of this, not speaking. And it looks like Kathy Gallo is also supporting this legislation and not speaking. I believe we have covered everyone. Sir, you are?
My name is Greg Ferreira. I didn't write my name down, but I believe I have to testify.
You did? Okay, please, Greg. In support, Greg?
Yes.
Welcome. Please proceed.
Thank you. Thanks for everybody who spoke before me, and thank you for listening. This is great. I have firsthand experience with this. I work at a grocery store. There are two situations that people seriously just want to know. People come up to me so many times just asking if a product has GMOs, and I can't look at it and be like, oh, there's GMOs in it. I personally don't know every company, what they produce, what they put in their stuff, what they do. I can't personally give that information. It would make my life so much easier for somebody in their company to put that on the ingredients list or on the labeling. It just makes sense. People want to know. Secondly, when we look for products to bring into the company to sell at our store, we put it through a fine-tooth comb. We look for products that don't have GMOs. We look for products that are well-made and promote good health for the future, for our people, for everybody. It's just so difficult to try to find a product that is not GMO if it's not labeled. It just makes sense. So I stand for it, and I would love to see it labeled. It just makes sense. Thank you so much. Have a good night.
And what store do you work for, Mr.
I actually work for the Green Grocer out in Portsmouth.
Where? In
Portsmouth.
Portsmouth?
Down in Rhode
Very
Island.
interesting. Thank you, Mr. Ferry. Very good. Anyone else that did not sign up? That concludes the hearing on 7082, 7255, and 7274. The next bill we're going to hear is by Representative Lima, 7257.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. As you know, for the last 25 years, I've been working on labeling milk that contains the synthetic hormone BST. BST is found naturally in cows. That's a true story. But the BST I'm talking about is made in an E. coli bacteria in a lab. And the only tests that have been done as to its safety, and I was totally amazed when I first put this bill and learned this, it was done for 90 days in a lab on mice. And I'm saying, oh my God, the company that makes the chemical is doing the testing. That's like calling Sears up and saying, who has the best washer machine? Who do you think they're going to tell you? The company that makes the chemical does the testing. And they said it's fine. So we don't know if this stuff is safe. And I'm sure, I was in a meeting, but I'm sure you heard a lot on the GMOs. All the people want is the right to know what kind of milk they're giving their babies. They want a label on it so that they can make those decisions and not the big chemical companies making these decisions, because they're in it for the profit. And why do they put synthetic BST in a cow? Because it produces more milk, which we don't need because the federal government buys back the surplus milk. And the problem is, this we know, is when you rev up the system of a cow, it causes a lot more udder infections. And how do they treat udder infections? With antibiotics. Ever wonder why antibiotics are not as effective in us? Because we're drinking them, we're eating them. Our system, they're not working well with our system because we've taken in so many antibiotics through all this chemical alteration. So, and I think we did pass this bill out of the House once, and I think Monsanto, the chemical company, and we know the wonderful things they've done to people, probably have made all their money now, so I'm glad. I don't think I see anybody here in a $3,000 suit to testify against me, so I guess they must have made all their money, and they're not here to go against me, so that's a good thing. But better late than never, so I say give the public what they need. Thank you.
Are there any questions for Representative Lima from any of the non-$3,000 suit people? Representative Lima, thank you very much, and thank you for your persistence with this legislation. Thanks.
Thank you.
Karen Salvatore signed up in support of this, and I think Karen had left. The Good Earth, John also signed up in support of this. Lillian Cataldi Sims, its individual, signed up in support. Libby Goodwin, who has supported this for many years, signed up in support and is not speaking. Paul Klinkman, Toxic Information Project, also supports this. And that concludes the hearing on 7256. The next bill we're going to hear is also by Representative Lima, House Bill 7257, an act relating, House Bill 7256, which, 7257, I was right, would permit dogs in outdoor dining areas of restaurants under certain circumstances.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. We put this bill in last year, and this committee wonderfully passed it last year, and the House passed it last year. Got caught up on one of those last night things because, from what I understand, the Senate was even going to pass it, which would have been a good thing. And you know how much I love animals, but I didn't put this in as an animal bill, believe it or not. I put this in because of a complaint from a restaurant. And right now, there's approximately, I don't have all my notes, 26 restaurants that allow dogs to sit in the outside area of their restaurant. Well, one of these restaurants, the health department went in and told them they couldn't have dogs there. Didn't give them a reason, nothing. And the restaurant next door still had dogs sitting there. So it seems like the health department was pick and choosing who could do it. So what I say is, here's where it belongs. If the restaurant owner decides that they want to allow dogs to sit in their outside seating area, it should be up to them. Why should it be up to anybody else? Dogs have been going to these there's quite a few restaurants. I mean, they even have a website, dog-friendly restaurants in Providence, Rhode Island dog-friendly restaurants. And I've been in restaurants with my dog, with other people there, and I got to tell you, it's such a great experience. You end up talking to people you'd never end up talking to and meeting nice people. I've never seen a problem with it. I've seen problems with drunks at bars causing fights or kids knocking things off tables. But our little furry friends, they want to get out every now and again. And they're parts of families. Some people consider their pet as part of their family. And when there's nice weather, they want to take their dog out for a little treat. So Why wouldn't we allow this? It's happening now. There haven't been any problems. If the owner of the restaurant doesn't want to do it, they don't have to do it. There's guidelines that they follow, and all this says is you post a sign saying you allow dogs, so people know. So if there's a dog hater, and I wouldn't want them in a restaurant anyway, doesn't want to go, they don't have to go in the restaurant. I mean, some of these restaurants are really great. They take out the water and the biscuits for the dog. I was sitting in a restaurant in Newport, and I said, you know, the only problem is, how come my dog got a drink before I did? But it was just that the bartender was a little busy. But I get such good feeling from people on this because it's something people really enjoy. And I think we should put it with the restaurants.
Thank you, Representative Lima. Any questions for Representative Lima? Yes, Representative McLaughlin.
Yes, Representative Lima, I would like you to know, last year I was in opposition of your bill, but as you totally understand.
You have a dog.
We have a new addition to our family. It's an Italian cane Corso. The mother weighs 120 pounds. The father weighs 160 pounds. And we plan on bringing them up to the State House. Charlene, myself, and
Winfield.
If it's good enough for the State House, these dogs can probably add to the menu and boost our economy. We'll see what happens.
So are you suggesting, Representative, bring your pet to work day in the Rhode Island House of Representatives?
Yes. I'd love to add that.
Representative Lima was interesting. When I had my ice cream shops, I would have people that came in. They would take out, but many of our customers said that their dogs especially really liked our product. And I thought it was a sign that the dogs had good taste and it was a quality product. But
definitely,
so I think it's interesting, and I know in Patuxent Village there are dog-friendly restaurants as well, and the owners will have signs up. So very interesting.
And on a serious note, the one thing, we're trying to be a very business-friendly state. And when I have a restaurant complaining to me about a department not treating them fairly, not getting a reason, and we don't have anything codified in law on how this should work, that's a bad thing, because that leaves policy open for abuse. But by codifying it in the law and letting the restaurant owner decide, I think we're going to make businesses very happy.
And I think that's the key point. Let the restaurant owner decide. Mm-hmm. Any questions for Representative Lima? Thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you very much. Have a good night.
There are no witnesses on this bill? Thank you. With that, my name is Joe McNamara, Chairman of the committee. On my right, we have Representative Dennis Canario, who's spending an evening with GMO labeling. Thank you, Representative Canario. On his right, we have my colleague from Warwick, Representative David Bennett, RN, who lends his expertise to our committee, usually on Wednesdays. This is a rare Tuesday night lounge appearance. On his right, we have Representative Art Handy, my colleague from Cranston, and also the chair of our Committee on the Environment. And on his right, we have Representative Marvin Abney from the great city of Newport and part of Middletown, Representative Abney. Thank you very much. And on his right, we have our official chaplain of the committee, Representative Lancia, my colleague also from Cranston. And Representative Lancia, is it Garden City and Eden Park as well?
No, it's Garden City, up in Glen Hills, over to Phoenix Avenue where the ice rink is, and then it goes to the other side of Elmwood Avenue, also to Parkview Middle School.
Oh, wow. So you're down abutting, yeah, you're all over the place. And on his right, Representative James McLaughlin, who represents Cumberland and part of Central Falls. Thank you for your patience tonight, members of the committee. With that, I'll entertain a motion. The motion to adjourn has been made and seconded. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This concludes the Rhode Island House of Representatives Committee on Health, Education, and Welfare. Have a nice evening.